Hello, everybody, and welcome to It Is Finally Time. Welcome to our top 12 albums of 2021. Woohoo! Chris, we did it. We made it through the whole year.
We did, yes.
Just barely, along with everybody else on the planet.
I don't know about that.
I mean, it wasn't the greatest year of all time.
Sure. I imagine there's like 5 or 6 million people who would have something to say if they could.
That's a good point.
Right into the mic, huh?
You may be asking yourself, Patrick, what is that beverage you have there?
If only the can were obscured.
The answer to that question would be one of my last cans of Mountain Dew Voodoo, the mystery flavor, of course, that Mountain Dew releases every fall around the Halloween time. This year, I believe, I haven't been confirmed. This has not been confirmed or anything, but I'm pretty sure that it's strawberry flavored Mountain Dew. So.
Wow.
Oh, so good. Okay, so if you have never seen a video like this before, which you probably haven't, watcher or listener, if you have us pulled up on some device and you're just listening with the YouTube video on in the background, we did a video like this last year, and we had so much fun. I basically been waiting 360 however many days to do it again. And so here we are doing it again, right?
We've done this. I think about this sometimes because we've effectively been doing this now for like 6, 7 years.
2014 was the first year we did this together. Yes.
And so many of those years, like a good percentage, I have just been, I don't know. I guess the short version is I cannot believe we're still doing this. But in a way where it's like I'm all in for it now. Like I don't want this to stop, even though I hate it right up until the very moment it starts. Like,
oh, for sure.
The idea was like, oh God, not this again.
And I feel like sometimes I have to be kind of like, come on, Chris.
You do.
Get your 12 albums. Make sure you listen to at least 12 albums this year so that you can order them.
It's so hard to listen to new music now because I do sound work all day. So it's like, it just like this year I had probably 16, I think, albums that I had to choose from. And the last time we did this when I was really invested in it and could do it properly, I think I had like 25. So, and last year was terrible. I was like, oh yeah, these maybe. I could give you 4 that I was, cared about and 8 that I just knew existed.
Yeah, and I think even if I remember correctly, last year you didn't even have a full list of 12. I don't think.
No, I think I had like come up with
9,
the last one towards the end, and otherwise it was like here's like 4 albums that I know are fantastic, and here's 8 albums that I know exist. This year was better for sure.
Yeah, and that was one thing I wanted to make sure that we started off this video by saying was that, in my opinion, I really think that like 2021 was a fantastic year for music. Like, in my opinion, with all the stuff that I listened to, like top tier year for music. Like, definitely one of the best years that I've experienced. And for me, I think that's more sort of like overall. I definitely think that in years past we've had like higher highs and maybe like lower lows. Not that that's something to celebrate, but you know what I mean. This year, I think across the board, everything was just like really nice. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the fact that last year we had the pandemic year, which was, people were spending a lot of time apart, but they were also spending time themselves, which may have allowed for more time to write new songs, time to record yourself in a studio. So, I think some of the albums on my list, I know for a fact would not have existed had it not been for the pandemic and the off time that some of these bands had to write a new album and then go and record it.
And I mean, we are still super in the middle of a pandemic that has not changed
100%.
For the better at all. I suppose, I mean, vaccines and stuff are making it much easier to deal with. But yeah, and I do wonder, like, I'm looking for when it will be, if there will come a point when it is more clear, like, well, here's a year that just has nothing because we're finally getting caught up to the fact that people had to spend so much time not making stuff because of the pandemic. Like, you're seeing it in movies and stuff too, where it's like, well, movies just haven't been coming out because it's tough to make and tough to release and it doesn't make sense. So, but music is still going all right. And one thing that's really interesting, I would say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, I'd say, albums on this list that could potentially have been made entirely by one person.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so that's all that out of the way. Let's talk a little bit about the music that came out this year, because like I said, I think that overall, across the board, this year was like a really good year. And I think that last year, if you recall when we did this, I talked about my having like listened to 712 different albums on Spotify, some crazy number that I got on my
Completely
Spotify
insane.
last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, so this year, I was really, really, really pumped to get that information again from Spotify in my like year in review or whatever they call it.
Yeah, the Wrapped.
The Wrapped thing, exactly. And somehow my Spotify account had been hacked. So
that's right.
There was I was messaging you about it, but somehow like there were things on my Spotify that I know I did not listen to for like 400 times or whatever. Like,
right.
And I understand that you can leave music on and it plays something else or whatever. A lot of the times I'll say like, you know, hey Google, which I don't want to say out loud because my Google's across the room, but I'll be like, hey Google. I'll be like, hey Google, play like death metal music, or play my favorite playlist to say is to play acoustic instrumental music. I love that. And so I know that it plays stuff that I don't know what it is, but my account was definitely hacked somehow. There was a bunch of weird foreign music on it, which, you know, Chris, I listen to foreign music all the time.
Yep.
But I'm one of those people, like, I definitely know what I listen to and I keep track of it for this specifically, you know, for my top 12 albums of the year. And so my whole Spotify Wrapped thing was totally bonkers and screwed up this year. But I think it's safe to say that I for sure at least sampled at least 500 albums this year, I would say. Mm-hmm. That's being generous because last year it was 712. And that's just sampling. Like that might just be like 10 seconds of a song and being like, nope, and bouncing.
Sure.
I'm going to say total, you know, in getting ready for this list, the last like 2 months, I've just been going back, looking through Spotify and trying to like, you know, like if I see an album cover and I think to myself, okay, I remember listening to that and I remember it being good, I would listen to it again, make it a point, like go through at least 3-4 songs and see how I felt. If I saw the album cover and I didn't remember what it was at all, listen to a couple songs, and if it didn't interest me or anything, just remove it from my list totally because I didn't remember putting it on there. Mm-hmm. So I think the total number of albums that I actually sat down and listened to intently, maybe not all the way through, but like intently sat and listened to at least 3, 4, 5 songs, had to be somewhere in like the 250 range, I would think, maybe. And that's just estimating based on not knowing the actual numbers. But I would say there was probably maybe like 70 albums at the end of the year. There was probably like 70 albums that I was going through and like, I remember this one, this one, this one, this one. This stack of CDs that I have right here, this is these are all the CDs that I bought this year that just came out this year. Obviously, I bought a lot of CDs this year because people are just throwing those things away like moldy cheese. Mm-hmm. You know, they're just giving CDs away in the streets for free. So I bought a ton of CDs this year, a lot of older stuff, 90s stuff, 80s stuff, all sorts of great stuff. But this is the stack of CDs that came out this year. And a lot of my top 12 albums came from this list because if I found something digitally that I really liked on Spotify, I made it a point this year to try to actually purchase the album and get the copy in CD form. Mm-hmm. There were 2, I think, albums that I have on my list that are only digital releases and did not come out in any sort of a physical format, except for a vinyl, but I'm not going to pay $50 for a vinyl, so screw that. But it was interesting, you know, to kind of keep track of all that kind of stuff this year. And I think I bought more physical CDs this year than I did last year. But I had, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 digital albums on my list last year. So we'll just see as we get into our lists here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I am now officially making the transition over to Spotify from YouTube Music because I was originally on Google Music or, you know, Google Play Music, GPM, and they transitioned it to YouTube Music. And so I was like, well, I'm already here. I'll stick around. There's several things about YouTube Music that I find to be worse than GPM. Most specifically is the volume. Like I try to keep music playing while I'm working on sounds and editing and stuff like that, but it obviously needs to be pretty quiet. And you like the very lowest possible volume setting is entirely too loud for that. And so I actually had to get a Chrome extension called Volume Master that allows you to individually adjust the volume of tabs to a certain level. And then I take that down from 100 to like 20%. So it's like, I don't know why YouTube thinks it needs to just be the world's loudest thing, but that's frustrating. And then I have like media keys on my keyboard that work sometimes and don't other times, and it always worked with GPM without fail. And then I think one of the and I really do love the Spotify Wrapped thing, and I don't get to be a part of it every year, and it's kind of a FOMO thing where it's like, man, I want to know these stats. It's so much fun to know that kind of stuff. And then the thing that pushed me over the edge is I saw a breakdown of how many plays a song needs to have on individual platforms for the artist to make $1 off of that. And the difference, and most disgustingly and ironically and very interestingly, the best one is Napster, which is like 55 plays.
Really?
And yeah, and Spotify, I don't remember the number, but the difference even between Spotify and YouTube Music is pretty high. Like YouTube is like at 1,200 or something, which is insane. So I was like, well, it was kind of the last straw. So I have YouTube Premium or Spotify Premium now, and I am slowly transitioning over, which I'll probably do after this. Like once, this is all finished up, I will make public top 12 playlists for every one of these years so people can just have them. And in my mind, I had this fantasy of like, when back old video rental stores where they would have places like these are the staff picks.
Staff picks, 100%.
Exactly. And it's like,
100%.
I have this mental fantasy of like one day somebody will just see enough of my playlist where like, ooh, this is a new one from him. I'm going to like this a lot. And then they just get all this new music. Like I'm such a sucker.
100%.
And I've also been really like, I want to make this list into a series of TikTok videos so bad because it'll be absolutely perfect. I went through and I found that at least one song from almost every album on my list exists in their sounds list, so I can use it as an audio behind what I'm saying, and it would be super easy to the albums I don't have a lot to say about, I can do in the 1 minute format, the long ones I can do 3 minutes, and it would just be perfect. And for some reason, I absolutely cannot bring myself to start doing it, so I would like to do that too. But I am making that transition now because it just makes sense officially.
I actually learned something about Spotify last night, and it made me really frustrated.
Oh, really?
So Chris, that I just got, for the first time since 2012, I got myself a new phone.
Yes,
right?
That's right. No more wood powered for you.
Hey, seriously. Well, so last night I was getting ready to go to bed, and I was like, I discovered a new album by a sweet band called Shagohod, which is one of the coolest names for a band ever, because Shagohod, of course, one of the coolest Metal Gears of all time. But come on. I mean, it's debatable, but I mean,
I just didn't know that was a thing. I don't know. Shagohod's not a word I've ever heard.
is what the Metal Gear was called in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater.
Okay.
Because every Metal Gear has its a different Metal Gear, and each one has its name. Codename Rex, Ray, Shagohod.
Yeah, Rex and Ray I remember. 3 is the Metal Gear that I know the least about, but anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was like, sweet, this is like a cool new band. I don't think it's going to make it on my list, but I'm excited to listen to it. So I put Spotify on my phone. I laid down in bed with my headphones, and I was like getting all comfy, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Track 1. So I opened the Spotify app, and I clicked on the album, and I went to my library, clicked on the album, and it didn't give me the option to play any of the songs. It just was the listing of all the songs, and I was like, oh, that's really weird. So I clicked on the album play, and it just started playing a random song, and I was like, oh, Spotify, no. We listen to songs in order here,
yes.
Okay? And so I was like,
this is a society.
I was like, maybe my phone's new, maybe it was on shuffle mode or something. No. So long story short, what I found out is I have only, Chris, I've told you this before, I only have the free version of Spotify.
Oh, I see.
I refuse to pay for digital music unless I own the digital music and can download it in high quality. At least for now. Maybe I will break in the future. But I use the free version of Spotify. And what I found out is on my tablet, which I've been using to play Spotify now on for a year, you can pick any song you want. You can play it in any order you want from any album you want. And then maybe every 15, 20 minutes or so, you get a little batch of ads, right? Okay, yeah. No big deal. On my PlayStation, you can pick any song you want. You go to any album, any song you want, listen to it for 20, 25 minutes. Then you get a little batch of ads, right? Not a big deal. Cell phone, you cannot choose what song you want. You can only listen to 2 songs in a row, I think, before they give you an ad. And I was just furious at Spotify.
Wow.
What on earth?
Wow, that's very interesting.
And the reason that this shocked me so much was because over Thanksgiving, I was talking to my cousin, and he has Spotify Premium as well. And he saw me on my PlayStation. He was like, hold on, don't you have free Spotify? How are you picking the songs? And I was like, what are you talking about? You can pick any song you want. You can listen to it for like 20, 25 minutes. Then you get an ad. It's no big deal. It's kind of silly to pay for, I mean, you get higher quality music, and I get that. And you can download stuff to listen to offline. Like the Spotify Premium is pretty good, but still $10 a month is a lot. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, really? Last time I was using it, like, you can't pick any songs or anything. And I was like, no, the only thing you can't do is you can't like tell your Google Assistant or whatever to play a particular song.
Oh, interesting.
You can't do that. But if you go into your like tablet and you're connected to your Google speaker, you can pick whatever song you want and tell it to play, and it'll play it, right? That's fine. Mm-hmm. So apparently, if you're using a cellular device with Spotify, the free version is the very limited restricted version that I just mentioned. You can't pick anything, can't play songs in order or anything like that. But everywhere else, on every other device that I've ever tried to use it on, you can pick any song you want, you can play them in any order you want, and you can play them for 20, 25, 30 minutes in a row. Like on my tablet, whenever I sit down and I make sure I always close the Spotify app. So when I open it for the very first time and click on the first song, basically usually I'll get an ad, like a Geico ad, and it says, after this ad, watch this ad and you'll get 30 minutes of uninterrupted music. And I'm like, heck yeah, that's great. So I watch the ad, and then when the song starts playing, I can shut it off and just sit there and listen, right? It didn't do that on my phone. Wow. It just was insane to me. So if people out there watching this, if you've only used Spotify, the free version of Spotify on your phone, you are gypped. You're getting screwed out of it. And you should absolutely use it on any other device. Go buy a tablet for $50 from QVC, right? Go buy some crappy, cheap QVC Samsung tablet. Load the Spotify app on it, and you can choose any song you want. You can play it anywhere. You can connect it to Google or whatever devices you have in your home and play it using the free version of Spotify.
It's interesting because I would have expected tablets to have the same problem as the phone, because it's a very similar
It's the same kind of device, right? Mm-hmm. 100%. But Weird. It's not. Because then I was scared. I was like, oh, well, maybe I haven't listened to Spotify since like January 1st. Maybe they switched it over, But so I went and grabbed my tablet, and it was the same as it always has been. So screw you, Spotify, for doing that, because that's ridiculous.
Interesting. Yeah, that's dumb.
But anyway, we've wasted enough time on that.
Yes.
And maybe I'll just cut that whole conversation out anyway. So what?
It's possible.
Who knows? But one thing I wanted to do right away, Chris, let's all take a moment of silence. Let's all take a moment of silence, everybody, for the song Bridge. This year, 2021, took many wonderful things from us. Betty White, all sorts of other cool things that I can't remember anymore because Betty White just died a couple days ago.
Millions of people.
The other important people, yes, hundreds and thousands of people, 100%. R.I.P. But the most important thing, arguably, that was taken from us in 2021 was the song bridge, the third section of a song. For some reason, it has become just pop culture norm that when you're writing a song, you only have to write two sections now. You only have to write a verse and a chorus. And you can just repeat each of those twice, and then your song can be over. I don't know who decided this. I wasn't invited to the committee, and I think they didn't invite me on purpose, because if they did, they knew I would have raised a stink. Because in my opinion, that third section to a song is so important, and I'm not going to go into that and all, but Chris, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, and you kind of said you didn't have this feeling, right, this year?
No, not really. It did not. It's certainly not to the point where I thought, what is it that all of these songs are missing? Let me think about it. Oh, yes, it's a bridge. Like, there's a couple of stuff on here where it's like, especially in my list, where it's like, this song, I love this song. I wish it wasn't 2.5 minutes, and it would probably benefit from a bridge. Or at the very least, the chorus and verse again, or something. Like, because it's such a good song, but it's way too short. And it could be a bridge problem, but I don't, the rest, like, I don't know, like, just to go into another thing that we're probably going to talk about in a minute is length of album overall. And I wonder, and it turns out like 9 out of the 12 albums that I have are all of a really appropriate length. They're very quite nice. And so maybe that's, I just don't, the stuff that I listened to didn't really have that problem in the same way for whatever reason.
Well, and then of course, like I said, like I listen to like so much stuff, and I'm not even going to go into how I discover new music using Spotify and everything. But when I go to a new album on Spotify, the first thing I do before I even click play is I scroll down to see how many tracks are on this album, because I've clicked on albums before and it's been one song because the people who uploaded it did it incorrectly to Spotify. But this year I saw so many albums that were just 9 songs or less. A lot of 7, 8, 9 song albums. Now, this year I got into progressive music a lot more than I ever have in the past. So the first thing my eye would do is go to the left side of the screen as I'm scrolling down. 7 tracks, you suck, band. Then I look over to the right side of the screen. Oh, every track is over 10 minutes long. Yeah. I forgive you. You know what I mean? So like, that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is bands that would write 2.5 minute long songs up to like this, what a song should be, 3.5 to 4 minutes long. And there's just 9 of those. And I listened to many albums this year that were really good, that were that length, but that at the end of the album, I just found myself wishing like, oh, I just wish there was a couple more songs. And kind of back to the bridge thing for a second, Chris, that I like hyper focus on song structuring. It is one of my pet peeves in music when song structures do not come back around. And this year, one of the things that I did differently was on my YouTube channel, which is probably where this video will be posted. So on my YouTube channel, I did a lot of album reactions this year, and I should have counted the total number that I did, but I think it was like 20 something for sure.
Oh, sure. Awesome.
If maybe even 30. I'm 30 something. I'm not sure. But when I'm doing that, sitting with an audience, hyper focusing on the music, almost every single time without fail, the thing that I was drawn back to constantly was my disappointment in a band to write a third part to a song. And without going into this, because I've talked about it on my channel many, many, many times in my reactions, I think that in order to get the full enjoyment out of a song, for me personally, I like to have obviously in a perfect world, every section of a song would be awesome. Like 10 out of a 10 verse, 10 out of a 10, chorus. But to me, the perfect structuring for a song is a verse and a chorus, and then verse 2, and then chorus 2. And then after you've heard that, like the chunk of the song, for the song to to go in a different direction for a little while, so that you can almost kind of like subconsciously forget everything that happened, so that when it does come back and the song finishes and climaxes with the chorus, that you feel that sense of coming back home and that sense of the familiar, and it brings you more happiness, And
interesting.
It's almost like a good story, they always say a good story is you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, of course, right? And there's different things that are attributed to each of those sections in order for the story to be satisfying at the end. But then, of course, we're talking about music, which is art. And so, of course, the artist has creative license to end the song abruptly on purpose so that you have like a feeling that is like, like a dissonant feeling or something, like you're left unsatisfied intentionally. But I'm talking about people who did not put that much thought into their music. And they just decided that this year they were going to make an album full of songs that were just verse 1, chorus 1, verse 2, chorus repeated, and the song is done. And when I hear a song like that, it just is frustrating to me because it feels like a very important part was left out, and I never had the opportunity to miss it and then have it come back. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. Yeah, it does. I've never thought of bridges that way. And I've never really thought of them. You said you're going to turn that up.
I forgot.
I know. And I've never really thought of them in any way, honestly, other than, whatever. And having you bring that up now, like, it's, to me, I see an opportunity for the song to effectively start at 0 and then build a steeper ramp up to a big climax. Like your post-bridge chorus or reprise or whatever is always going to be like, let's say your first verse has a thing, and then your chorus, and then your next verse has some slightly different things, and then the chorus, and then that third ending after the bridge is the two things of the first two verses together in like a big thing.
Right, 100%.
And it's such a nice, like, bridges are such a great ramp into that, especially depending on the type of music you're listening to, because then the bridge is also a great place for like breakdowns and drops 100%. And all kinds of stuff where it's you're building it's that beginning, middle, end. You've got this story of how the song works, and it does. And it's like, I can't sit here and say that any artist like intentionally left it out or didn't put it in because they're lazy, because I absolutely refuse to claim that anybody making art professionally is lazy for any reason.
Unless they're fading a song out.
Fade outs are lazy.
There's literally no reason to ever do that.
There's nothing else you can say.
It's a lazy, please end your song.
Please end the song, absolutely. And so it's like I can't really speak to why that is. And even if it's like, especially like there could be a component of, we're trying to make this have as much traction as possible in the world of modern pop songs, and that's why this is this way. And I mean, if that's the case, that's a real shame. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's some great bands that, like Minus the Bear, for example. In my mind, that band is all bridges. Like the best thing that Minus the Bear does is a bridge. Every song, as good as the song is, the bridge is going to be the thing that you remember about why that song is so great.
Well, and if you think about it, like with metal, like you were saying, the bridges are for breakdowns as well. Mm-hmm. But also in a lot of metal, the bridge is where you take the energy of the song and you bring it down.
Yeah.
Right? A breakdown is one thing because it's bringing the energy down, but it's like that's almost like sometimes the heaviest part of the song.
Yeah, it's a certain type of focus.
But if you're thinking about like a crazy like symphonic metal or song, or a speed metal song, or some sort of like crazy heavy metal song that's just going, and the chorus is nice and cool and catchy, and maybe clean sung chorus, distorted vocals for the verse. After the second chorus, everything stops. The guitars ring out. There's like a little acoustic guitar part or a piano part or something. Some lady comes in and sings the vocals or whatever, and it builds like you were saying, and then you have that final climactic ending to the song. When you without those two sections in there, the whole song just kind of feels like to me.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't have any dynamics that makes it memorable. You just have a thing, and it goes, and then it's done.
And one of the things I was going to bring up as an example of this, to just make sure we're not just talking out our butts, Atreyu came out with a new album this year.
Ooh.
And I saw it and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And so I didn't even like pay attention to the song lengths. I saw there was like 16 tracks or something. And I was like, heck yeah, that's awesome.
Nice. It's a good number.
And so I started listening to the first song, and it was verse, chorus, done. And I was like, oh, okay. Second song, verse, chorus, basically done. And I was like, hold on a second. Was that a real song, or was that like an intermission thing?
Yeah.
Third track, same thing. Felt way too short. So then I looked at the length of the songs. Not one song out of the 14, 15, 16, I can't remember the exact total number of tracks, is over 2 minutes and 30 seconds long.
Oh, that's too bad.
Not one song.
Why?
And so then to me, it's like, okay, you are making music for TikTok, right? Like, this is TikTok generation music. You are trying to appeal to someone with a very short sense of attention span. And it was really disappointing to me because all of the songs were really cool. They had all these really cool like electronic sections to them, and it was really neat. But like the idea that we're getting, and I'm not saying that every song should be 10 minutes long either. I'm not saying that. What I like is music that has patience. Music that takes its time. I don't mind a minute-long intro to a song. I understand that for some people that can be pretty long, and it can be kind of annoying sometimes. But like if it's a metal song or something, and it starts with some cool sound effects, and then there's maybe some sort of like a sample, and then like the guitar comes in and does the riff 4 times, and then the whole band comes in and everyone's doing that riff, and it's a cool riff, you're already talking about being like 20 some 30 some measures or bars into the song. And from there the song can change and do whatever it wants. But it's just this idea that all of a sudden all of these songs are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Technology is not the thing that's limiting. Back in the day when people would record things onto 45 RPM records, just a single, and you could only fit 3 minutes on there, like that was the technology limiting the music in a negative way, but it was just something you had to work with. All those songs that faded out in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when they released them on singles, the song would be going, like America is the worst example of this, like Horse with No Name, Ventura Highway. The song is just going and it's building up, the bridge is building, and they get to that 3 minute mark and they just fade the song right out. Doesn't matter what they were doing, doesn't matter if the song was supposed to be 7 minutes long. You get to that 3 minute mark, fade out. And it's terrible, but it had a reason to do that. Nowadays, we do not have a reason, unless, like I said, it has something to do with TikTok or some sort of a social media aspect that I'm unaware of. But I wanted to make sure we took a little time here at the beginning of the video, Chris, to talk about stuff like that, because it's something I want to keep track of kind of as we go through this. You know, all of my albums are relatively long, and they all have a good number of tracks on them, and they all appeal to me structurally, because structure is one of the most important things in music to me, as silly as that sounds. You know, so we'll just kind of something I wanted us to keep track of.
Right. And, you know, to further along that, something I brought up before we started this is like, so, you know, we have our sort of, what does that mean?
Done. It's done.
Okay. Did you dump some onto the desk?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's okay. I was just pointing out that I finished my special beverage that I saved for this before we got to album 1.
Very good. Well, because now, you know, we have an album length that we have sort of agreed upon, where it's like 10 songs on an album is the minimum allowable number of songs to be considered a proper album.
Right.
Just per our own personal preferences.
Well, because then you're starting to talk about the difference between an LP record, a long play, and an EP, an extended play, which is considered a smaller project.
Right. Yeah. And then it's like, yeah, anything under 10 songs really blurs that line of LP and EP, unless those designations are specifically about length in time. Because that's something that I know that we've thought about before is like any song under 3 minutes is frustrating. So what is the default minimum album length in minutes? Based on those two metrics, I would say you don't want anything under 30 minutes.
That's exactly the number I was going to say.
Yeah.
30 minutes. And I found out this year, to just correct myself, having said this in many videos throughout this year and in years past, even on the Music Room when we used to do that. I used to use Linkin Park's hybrid theory as an example, remember, and say that their hybrid theory was 29 minutes long.
Yeah.
That it, in fact, is less than 30 minutes. Well, this year, I actually went and checked, and I was listening to hybrid theory for the first time in several years, because they released the special deluxe editions and all that stuff this year, and so I was listening to it like remastered.
Yeah.
And it's the same album, and it's like 37 minutes long. So I was totally off, and I don't know where or how I got that statistic. You know, there is the instrumental song. So maybe if you subtract the instrumental song, it's like closer to 30 minutes, but whatever.
What is the shortest album on your list, time-wise?
Okay, that's a good question. I got one that's 41 minutes. 41 minutes. 41 minutes.
Wow. Because I've got a 32, a 29, a 25, and a 23.
Oh, that's... I would wag my finger at that band and be like, you, sir, madam, or group of people, you did not release an album. You released an EP. Yes. You released a collection of songs that you shouldn't refer to as an LP, as a full album.
Right. And so that was one of the things that made me wonder, like, where is the cutoff for that? Because 7 songs at 23 minutes for a total album is like, I don't know if I would agree with that, sir.
Well,
like,
so let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum. What's your longest album?
Longest album is 58.
Mine is 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Nice. That's a good number. That's a lot.
Now, you and I know that 80 minutes is the most you can fit onto a CD.
Yes. As far as consumer-grade blank CDs were allowed the last time I checked.
Yeah. According to the Red Book standard. Or Blue Book standards. Yes. Which one's for Cars? Is that Blue Book?
Cars is blue.
Okay, so then Red Book would be the CD.
Yep.
All right. Have we talked long enough about all this? Oh, yes. One other thing I want to say.
No.
Do you think we will have any? Not. Do you think we will have any albums that are the same before we get into our lists? Because
no.
Okay, I don't either.
Maybe one, but I don't expect to.
That was what I thought too. I thought maybe out of everything, I think that there's an album that you have on your list that I could have had on my list, but I don't.
But and if you don't, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So, okay.
So I have interesting things to say about that album.
We'll talk more about that as we get further into our stuff. Okay, so for the purposes of the video as well, listener. No, I'm just going to say listener, watcher. One of the things we're going to try to do a little differently this year is I want us to try to, Chris, when we say our album, say the name of the album by the band, and then I'm going to leave like maybe 2 or 3 clean seconds there before we go on, so that I can play just a little sample of one of the songs from the album in the background of the YouTube video. And then I think what I'm going to do is just kind of have it play underneath while we're talking a little bit.
Great.
Because, if you're going to be a bear, you might as well be a grizzly, as my boss used to say.
That's very funny.
So we'll see what happens. I will post this video somehow, so if there's some sort of copyright issue or something, I may have to take stuff out. But for all intents and purposes, you, watcher, will be able to hear what we're talking about this year a little bit at least, maybe low in volume underneath what we're saying, but it should give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on. I
was going to ask you, because I know that you recently did that reaction video that actually had music in it.
Yes.
How did that go? Have you had issues with that yet?
No. It basically, what it did was it just said the video cannot be not monetized, but the effect on my channel was nothing, and it was still playable in all countries. Because that was another thing that I was worried about, that it might be that I might lose the ability for it to be played in certain countries. But I know that just depends on the copyright, the type of copyright that the copyright holder has. So we'll just see what happens. I mean, theoretically, we'll be talking about we would have sections at least of 24 different songs from 24 different bands in this video. So if one of those bands raises a stink with their stuff online, that might cause us an issue, but we'll just see what happens. Okay, so my number 12 is probably very surprising to you, The Golden Casket by Modest Mouse.
The only thing about that surprises me is that it's number 12.
Number 12, okay.
Because I would expect a Modest Mouse album to be on your list no matter what. So the fact that it's at the bottom is interesting.
Well, you definitely know how much I really enjoy their album from back in 2007, I think it was. We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank. That is one of my top favorite albums of all time. Their album that came out 3 or 4 years ago, though, that I can't remember the name of, was so disappointing to me. It was really disappointing and didn't make it on my list at all that year. And actually, I don't think any of their albums from before their album that I really like, We Were Dead Before the Ship Sank, I don't think any of those would have made it on my top 12 either. So I understand. Okay. I understand your thought there that I love that album so much, but it was very surprising to me. And I will just say about my list overall, I messaged you like last week. I was like, I'm having so much trouble because there's just like so many good albums that I don't know. Like usually for me, number 1 is pretty easy to pick every year.
Agreed.
Then after that, it's like maybe the top 5. I have a pretty good idea, but maybe kind of hard to shuffle them around through there. And then after that, the rest of the list is just sort of like you're kind of just picking and choosing and however you feel that day. Well, this year, what happened was 1 through 8, I was like, these albums are all fantastic, and I really, really, really enjoyed them. But from 8 on, 9, 10, 11, 12, I could have thrown in there like pretty much really anything. There were so many albums that I liked a lot, but what I ended up choosing, and the reason that this album, The Golden Casket by Modest Mouse, makes it on there, is because I kept coming back to it throughout the year. I just kept coming back to it. And every time I would listen to it, I would go, I forgot about that song. I forgot about that song. I forgot about that song. But every one of those songs, I could sing along with. I forgot about it, but when it got to the chorus, I'm like, oh, I forgot. This chorus has like a really cool like choir of people in it, or like this song has like a really cool like weird little effect in it here. And I would remember things about it. And I would listen to like the first half of the album like 5 or 6 times because that's just I peter off the album a little bit halfway through. So then I started listening to just the back half of the album over time, and I liked the back half just as much as the front half. I really enjoyed a lot. I didn't say it yet, but The Golden Casket is 12 tracks, 50 minutes long.
Nice.
And one of those songs is sort of like a half song, but it was originally written as to be a second section to one of the other tracks. So it's its own separate track on the album, but it was actually written to be the second half of the track that actually came before it. But they just did us the courtesy of putting it a track separator there so we could skip it if we wanted. But this album has really great production, which is something that I feel their last album lacked, and is one of the reasons that I loved We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank so much.
Oh, sure.
That album has some of my favorite production ever. And so this album has really, really, really good production on it. Everything is very close mic'd. The effects that are used are heavy, but not to the detriment of the song. So like if there's some crazy like vocal effect on Isaac's vocals, it's not taking away from the rest of the song, which is something that Modest Mouse is one of those bands that they can get too up their own butts and not necessarily do what's good for the song and get lost in the shuffle of things. And that does not happen on this album. Every song has a nice, catchy chorus that is a clearly separated section from the rest of the song. There's 2 songs that have swear words in them, which is something that I don't particularly care for as much. And as I'm getting older, I actually find that if I listen to an album and it has just like one swear word in one song, I'm just like, why would you do that? Like, just don't say that word there. Say any other word.
As you get older, the opposite should be true.
Well, yeah. But like if I listen to like an album and they're swearing all over the place, it's like, oh, well, this is just like intrinsically a part of what's happening. But to just have like 1 or 2 swear words, it's just like, it doesn't even matter. I just bring that up because 2 of the songs of the 12 on this album, the F word is actually like in the title of the song. So it's like, I knew there was going to be swearing before it came up, and they just went ahead and did it. And it's funny both times. Like it's like a little pun thing that like is funny and makes me chuckle even thinking about it.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And so it's like, this is how you do it right, in my opinion. And so those are probably my 2 least favorite songs on the album, not because of the swearing, but I think just because it's just like a weird, they're both weird songs.
Yeah. It sounds like if you're using the language in that sort of way, then otherwise the song isn't going to have a ton of substance.
Yeah. And so it's fun. And I really actually do enjoy the lyrics. And people who watch my channel might know that I don't focus on lyrics very much. But with this Modest Mouse album, some of the lyrics really stuck with me. And I'm actually going to talk about one of the songs on this album a little bit later when we get to the best tracks of the year, best songs of the year, because I think in my opinion, one of the 3 best songs that came out this year was on this album. So I will mention that when we get to that part. But cool. So yeah, that's the Golden Casket by Modest Mouse, my number 12.
Great. My number 12 is a new artist. Definitely new to me. First album, has 2 EPs, but this is her first actual full album. It is 18 songs at 54 minutes, one of the longest albums on this list.
18 tracks, that's a lot of tracks.
And it is a lot of tracks. It is Digital Pacific by Luna Shadows.
Okay.
And I found out about her because she is a friend, a friend of mine interviewed her for his podcast. And I was like, who's that? And he showed me, and I was like, this is great. And it falls very nicely in that, like, female-led synth pop that I love so much. And it's a little bit more chill, and it's got sort of a darker vibe to it. My favorite song on the album is a song called Palm Springs. And it's like, I did kind of, when I was going through and looking for which song to pick on each of the albums for the best one, I wanted to try to avoid the singles because it just seemed a little, who wants the single to be the best song on an album? But it is, I don't know, I don't have as much to say about it as I think you did for the Modest Mouse album. It just, there isn't really anything on it that is awful. My favorite, well, see, and here's the problem. Here's the thing. The reason I picked Palm Springs is because my favorite song is 1 minute and 33 seconds. It's like this, it's sort of like an intermission, sort of interlude kind of song. And it's like, boy, if this was a full song, this is the one for sure.
So with 18 tracks, then are there several songs that are sort of intermission ones?
Just in terms of tracks that are under 2 minutes, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
But yeah, like I said, it's still 54 minutes, so it's got plenty of beef in it.
Oh, sure.
Plenty of meat on the bones for sure, but yeah, and it's like, this is actually not the only album on this list where my favorite song is some weird short little intermission track, which is so interesting. But yeah, it's It's chill. There isn't anything on it that is particularly off-putting. It is, as negative as it sounds to say that it's very samey, I don't necessarily mean that. It's a very consistent album. Like it's not a big, not a lot of peaks and valleys. It's just really consistently at like a 7.5. Fantastic debut album. And I am looking forward to whatever happens next. It's always interesting to see, especially the sophomore album, the classically stressful sophomore album of any artist. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that.
Now, let me ask this. Even though I know we're probably playing a track underneath this while we're listening so everyone can hear what it sounds like, what would you compare it to so that I can kind of get an idea of what it would sound like? Something that I know. I mean, is it just a lady singing with electronic music, or?
I would say it is very similar to Melanie Martinez, which has been a driver of so many of my favorite songs and artists since Crybaby came out. But it's almost like a lo-fi Melanie Martinez, where it's like it's not super poppy and really high energy. It's very chill. It's very like the floating around in a swimming pool in California version of Melanie Martinez. It's not super dark either. It's just really chill.
A lot of reverb on the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you definitely like that sort of like dreamy dream pop.
I really do.
Stuff.
I love that. I love songs that sound like they're coming from ghosts. It's one of my favorite things.
Absolutely, ghosts that are for some reason sitting 40 feet away, in a giant empty metal room.
Yes, but like
not to just crap on your number 12. But.
No, for sure.
Okay, so now we're on to my number 11 then. My number 11 is Omega by the symphonic metal band Epica. Now, this album this one and Modest Mouse were the two that were just so close to not making it on my list, because I really had like 3 other albums, including these two, that I were like, every day I'd be like, okay, this one needs to go on there, this one needs to go on there. No, this one. And when we get to the end of this video and we talk about our honorable mentions, and I left honorable mentions down there for like at the end of the video close to our higher ups on purpose, so that, if either of us had any albums that we thought might have ended up on our lists but that didn't, and if we talked about those earlier, like I was trying to be strategic with the way we're talking about it, but Omega ended up being on my list because you know how much I love symphonic music, symphonic metal. And to me, symphonic metal is such a cool, special genre. It's very hard to make a symphonic metal album. Epica is what I consider to be one of the 3 big symphonic metal bands. They've been around forever. This year, they got a lot of traction because they had several songs where Floor Jensen, the singer for Nightwish, sings with them live on stage. So a lot of reaction channels were doing reactions to Epica's songs where Floor sang with them. So Epica got a lot of what do you call it when someone hears something that wouldn't normally, like exposure. They got a lot of exposure this year, and the album is fantastic. It is Epica. Their last 3 albums, I really kind of consider them almost like a trilogy of albums, and I think that they consider them that as well. I have the deluxe edition of the album, which comes with a bonus disc of acoustic versions, 4 acoustic songs, which are acoustic versions of 4 of the songs from the regular album. And they have done that now on their last 4 albums. So we could have an entire album, basically, of just acoustic songs from their last 4 albums. And when I say acoustic song, Epica makes acoustic songs just as good, if not better, than their full albums. And on this album, they decided to go in more of like a sort of a Latin feeling, like flamenco style with several of the songs.
Interesting.
And it's just fantastic. I mean, it is fantastic classical acoustic guitar playing. There's all sorts of like mariachi sounding things. The singer is still the same singer, Simone Simons. She is fantastic no matter what she's doing.
They're from somewhere else, right?
They're from Sweden.
Okay, I was going to say, you're not allowed to name your child the same first name and last name unless they're like, it's part of your culture, I guess.
Good old John Johnson.
Chris Christopherson.
I never thought of it like that, but it's totally true. Chris Christopherson. Never thought of that. But so anyway, on disc 1 of Omega, there are 12 tracks, and it's 70 minutes long. So that's long.
That's good.
Disc 2, the acoustic disc, there's 4 tracks, and it's 17 minutes long. So you can see, of all 16 of those total tracks, the shortest track is 4 minutes and 30 seconds long.
Nice.
So the exact opposite of what we were talking about. They have 2 songs that are over 7 minutes long, and they have 1 song that is over 14 minutes long, and it is split into 5 different movements, and it is actually part 3 of their Kingdom of Heaven. So they have like Kingdom of Heaven Part 1 on one of their albums like 15 years ago, Kingdoms of Heaven Part 2 on their album like 7 or 8 years ago, and then Kingdom of Heaven Part 3, and I believe it's the final part of that trilogy of songs. So there's a lot of really cool stuff to like on this album. It's very heavy. It's very, I believe 3 of the songs were actually primarily written by Simone, and those are my 3 favorite songs on the album. They're a lot more poppy, and they have a lot more like people who aren't necessarily into metal could get into them. I guess they're a lot more accessible, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
And one thing I will say, when I was doing my reaction to this album on my channel, I mentioned, and I still think it's true, for some reason, this album just lacks that crispy high end. It's like during the mastering, someone put a low pass filter on it at like 10K or maybe 15K. So it just feels like it's lacking a little bit of that super high end, but it really doesn't take away from the mix. Your ears adjust when you listen to it. The only other thing that I have to say about this album is that my number 1 song of the year is on this album. It is a song that I'm going to talk about now, and then I'll mention it again later, just in passing when we get to our top songs. The song is called Rivers, and this song literally makes me cry when I hear it every time. And it's not a cry out of being sad, and it's not a cry like happy cry. It is like a Mad Max Fury Road, seeing the truck, them drive into the storm, and I'm in the theater and I'm watching it, and I can't believe how incredible what I'm seeing is. So I sit there and I cry while I'm seeing Mad Max for the first time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like the perfect storm of everything. And the song is kind of like cheesy pop song, really. Like Adele could sing this song.
Sure.
And it would be awesome. But because it is a symphonic metal ballad, that starts really quiet and nice with a cool little piano riff, and then Simone singing over the top of it, and then she sings the chorus, and then everything comes down a little bit, and then she starts singing, and a children's choir comes in, and you're like, oh boy, we just stepped it up here. And then she sings the chorus again, and then after the second chorus, the guitars come in, and then there's this soaring guitar solo that's doing the melody of the song, and you're just like, this is where symphonic metal is at its absolute height. You and I have talked about this before. Symphonic metal ballads are, in my opinion, the best type of song that's out there in the world, because you get classical music, you get incredible performances from every aspect of the different musicians, and then at the same time you get these giant metal, and there's always that giant climactic ending to the song. And in this song, when the main riff comes back in, and the guitar riff is so simple, it's just boo-dee-doo-dee-doo, and so the guitars are all going doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and she's going, we've all been dancing in the dark. It's just amazing. And then the song has these like kind of simple lyrics, and it's just about like breaking the chains and like living freely and all this stuff. And it's so hokey, but like it is absolutely hokey in like the perfect way. And the climax of the song where everything comes in and the children's choir comes back in, and it just brings it. And I'll be driving along listening to it, and I'm just like sniffling.
It's just like unapologetically
so
soaring.
Like every time I listen to it, it's so good. And there were a lot of really great songs this year, but to me, that song is the number 1 song of the year. I think it even beats out, and I know it should be disqualified because it was released last year, but Holy Roller came out on an album this year, folks. Okay, we got Holy Roller released this year.
Yeah.
Yes, and in my opinion, that's like one of the greatest songs of all time, literally ever. And I think this song is better than that. I
forgot about that album on my list, but
that's
I don't know if it would have made the list, but it's worth mentioning.
We'll get to talk about it later. Yeah. But so yeah, that's all I wanted to say about this, and I wanted to go through my reason that I liked it because of that song as well. And then when we get to our favorite songs, I'll just mention it again, and we don't need to talk about it. But there you go. My number 11.
My number 11 is the only album I think we may share, or potentially could have.
Oh, do you want me to guess what it is?
Yes.
Is there a Flux in the title?
Yes, Flux is the title.
Yeah, I know.
Yep,
okay.
Flux by Poppy.
Okay.
And this is one of the shorter ones. It's 9 songs to 32 minutes. But this is a very interesting album because I Disagree was my favorite album. No, was one of my favorite albums of last year.
It was your number two, I think.
Okay, was my number 2 for last year. Because it was like, before that, I didn't really know who Poppy was until she had the EP that dropped before I Disagree. And it was like, this is, because you showed her to me and you were like, this is this bubblegum sort of existence that she has. And now she's making this interesting transition into metal. What is this going to be like? Mm-hmm. How is this going to sound? And it went straight to 11. And it's like, there are so many aspects of that album that are so damn heavy and sludgy and like it's just so beefy. It's so good. And then the transitions between that really heavy metal and then that light switch back to like poppy bubblegum stuff back and forth. It's just, the crafting is pristine. It's so excellent. And so this album is like what you would expect to have come before that. This is a much more accessible, unfortunately less interesting version of the same thing. Like, there are these little flips between the types of music, but it's just so much more, it's just a safer album. Everything about it is safe in terms of the presentation. There's a lot of stuff that you would hear, like I hear a little bit of Muse in this. There's a little bit of like grunge stuff, but there's also some, maybe like just overall 90s pop sounding music. And so like genre stuff is all over the place, but it doesn't have the staying power of that previous album. It's just so much more middle of the road. And it's like, this is the album that you would expect to be the bridge between what she was before and I Disagree. If I Disagree and this album flipped things, the order would make a lot more sense, because it's like, here's this super poppy bubblegum stuff. Here is the transition into sort of like more rock music, something a little bit heavier with these nice transitions that are a little bit more blended. And then here's I Disagree, which is the final, polished, well-managed, understood version of what we are trying to go for. And so it's kind of strange that they're flipped around. But because of that, that's why it's only a number 11 this year, is because it's just not quite as interesting and long-lasting. It doesn't have the staying power. Like, I'll listen to I Disagree forever. That album is timeless and excellent and will always be in my rotation, and this will be an album that it's like, oh yeah, there's that album that she did. Like, I'll put this in the rotation, as is customary for the top 12 albums. They all go into my main playlist after they spend their time in their top 12 spot at the end of the year. But it'll be one of those things where it's like a song will come on and I'll go, who's this? Oh, that's a Poppy song from that album I keep forgetting about,
Okay, well, I disagree with everything you just said.
Fantastic.
I really do. And I'm not going to go on and on about it, because if you want to hear very deeply about my thoughts on the album, you can watch my reaction on my YouTube channel for this album. I am shocked you do not like this album more, because to me, this is exactly, Chris. And when I tell you this, you're going to go back and listen to it and be like,
I have a feeling I already know what you're going to say.
If Lights made a rock album, this is exactly her
I didn't
voice.
Think that. I didn't.
She sounds indistinguishable from Lights vocally throughout almost the entirety of this album. When she's that Hysteria song where she's singing something hysteria, like that is Lights saying Siberia. It's literally the same thing. And I actually played clips of the song in my reaction to talk about that. But even it goes way beyond that. Flux and Flow, one of the most famous Lights songs of all time.
I think about that when I hear Flux. I think about that Lights song every time.
1000%. And you should. This album sounds like a Lights album. So beyond even that, I think your everything you were saying about the production and the 90s feel and everything and how it felt like the album that should have come before, to me, the thing that makes this album special is that it did come after I Disagree, which was the highly polished, crazy, like very much like baby metal, Japanese, like shocking, like you were saying, going from the bubblegum to like it's the like, here we have like our niche and we'll fit into our niche and album. And it's fantastic. I like that album. But I think that Flux is way better than I Disagree.
Because there was a consideration I had where it's like this, because you could also make an argument for, like with so many bands, they have their first album, it is the sound that they're going for, and then their subsequent albums are what the polished regular version of that sounds like after they get it figured out. And you could argue that this is that same thing, where like the dynamics of the I Disagree are so stark and harsh that it doesn't have a ton of accessibility, and that this album makes more sense, like in an overall existence within music. So I could see.
But I also think that like the less accessible nature of I Disagree was intentional. Like I think that that's what it was meant to be. But I think that Poppy being out on the road, I think I have so many thoughts about Flux. Like literally, you really should watch my review, Chris, of it, my reaction to it, because I love the production of the album. I think that it was such a huge risk for her to take. And because I know how an album like this would have to be recorded to have it sound this way, like it was a choice from before they went into the studio to make this album sound like this. This is not one of those cases where they went and recorded it and then they were mixing it and they're like, let's adjust this here and this here. And that kind of gives it like a 90s feel. The guitar tones that were used, the sounds that were used throughout this entire album, they were very carefully chosen, and the songs were carefully constructed to make something that sounds exactly like what they wanted it to sound like. You would not make an album that sounded like this unless you were specifically aiming for it. And I think because of that, the production is way more impressive than on I Disagree.
Interesting.
And I think that the songwriting as well, you're sorry, and I don't want to bogart it, it's your album, but I think that it is much more accessible, but I think it's only more accessible in the fact that it's less heavy. I think other than that, this is a great example. Most of the songs on the album are just verse, chorus, done. She doesn't do many bridges. She has like 2 songs at the end that are like 6 minutes long and that are weird and they're like slow and they kind of build, or 1 song at least. I haven't listened to the album.
They're actually only both. The very first Flux is 5 minutes, but the 2 at the end are only 4.
Oh, well, I remember maybe it's not actually even a longer song, but there's no structuring to it. There's no repeating part to it. And it starts slow and there's almost like a robotic feel to the whole thing. But man, I feel like I could write essays on this album with how cool it is. I think that they chose to do it the way that they did. But go
well,
ahead,
and it's interesting because to bring that up that way, I think really the only reason this is lower is because of how much I liked I Disagree. Because I'm hearing it, like I was listening to this a little bit while you were talking, and like this is a Metric album. Like this is 100%.
Yes, that type of production. Yes.
Which is one of my, I love Metric, and I am waiting very patiently for them to put out more music. But it fits in so well with like exactly that, with Lights and Metric and every other band that sounds just like that, which is not a complaint. It just is, there is a very similar sound there, to the point where it's like, if this was by any other person, any other group, or I Disagree didn't exist, I bet you're right. It would probably be a lot higher on my list because it fits all of those other things that I like so well.
Right. And you have to remember too, like I've been a fan of Poppy now for years, like going back before she did any of the metal stuff.
Yeah.
And so like to me, this album is also the way it is because when they released I Disagree, she got to tour. However, I Disagree came out last year during the pandemic. But I'm sure she did some shows and she did some live things.
Actually, I think I Disagree came out before because I think it was a January album.
Oh, actually, I think you're right because you're right because you got to see her perform.
Yeah, I saw her in February.
Right.
Yeah,
and well, actually, no, the album came out later in the year, but she had released like 4 or 5 singles from the album before that, I think. Or well, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But my point was going to be that she and her bandmates, who I think are incredibly talented and should not be overshadowed because the guitar playing is fantastic. But I think that she and her band, she got to go on the road. and she got to have the band experience. And what do you do when you're a band on the road and you have nothing to do in a car for 12 hours while you're riding in the bus to the next town? You write more songs.
Yeah.
And what are your songs going to sound like? A band in a bus just jamming, you know? And so that's what this is. This is a band who wrote, this is more of a band sound for sure. That rather than I Disagree, which was much more like featuring Poppy and then like this crazy, insane, you know, technical. And that's not even, we haven't even brought up her Eat EP, which came out this year as well.
Yeah.
That NXT EP, that is like mathcore. That whole album is like crazy, insane, like technical metal with like the most intense vocals Poppy's ever done, for sure. And so like,
man,
I will say this 100%. If those Eat songs, which sonically wouldn't fit on Flux, but if those Eat songs were included on Flux and like mixed in throughout the album and maybe mixed a little differently so they fit on this album, it would be my probably top 5 albums on my list.
Interesting. But I've listened to that EP, but I don't remember when I did, and I don't remember anything about it.
Well, you should go listen to it again, especially now that we're talking about it.
It didn't stick. Yeah, for sure.
But Poppy, this album Flux is not on my top 12 at all.
Okay.
So it was on my honorable mention list, but I figured you were going to talk about it and have it on your list, but I'm shocked that it's not higher.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's just the placement, because it's like this things happen sometimes. Like when Gravity came out, and it was like the build up to the movie Gravity, I was just at 11 all the time. I was like, this is going to be the best damn movie I've ever seen in my life. How on earth can this possibly be as good as I want it to be? There's no way. And then it was, and so it was like, and then the next year was Interstellar by Christopher Nolan, and I was like, well, Christopher Nolan makes a space movie. It's gonna happen again. Like it's gonna be so good. What am I gonna do? And initially, I hated Interstellar because I just wanted it to be Gravity again, and it absolutely wasn't. But now, I really like that movie a lot. It just because it is settled into its place of being something very different.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised to see this album make its way, into that kind of thing where it grows on me a lot after I remove it from the fact that I Disagree was before it. And I think that the fact that, like, I've listened to all of Poppy's older stuff quite a bit now after the fact, but if I had like to view this as a whole, where I Disagree isn't my introduction to her, but would instead be the 5th album of hers that I know, where she just tried a different thing, this probably would fit differently in that group too, like you said.
Well, and you also have to remember too, like being a big, huge fan of wrestling, Poppy was like on EP or on NXT this year live like 3 or 4 times over the last calendar year performing. And like the whole Eat thing, when they released the EP, it was an NXT soundtrack specifically she did in collaboration with WWE and all that stuff. So like I was exposed to that even more, and she even came and did like a thing, and she went in the ring and like pushed someone off the top rope and stuff. So like she was involved in things, and to just think about like how she started with her I'm Poppy videos when she looked like she was like 16 years old, and and the fact that like just because she's done so much cool stuff, I feel like in some ways I almost kind of like I really admire her ability to choose the next thing she's going to do and then like go 110% for that. But the thing that she chooses is always like surprising. Like I personally love the fact that this album came after I Disagree.
Yeah.
Because no band would do that. No one would do that.
It's true. It's so true.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to something I'm so excited to discuss. And Chris, you got to start reining me in. I'm talking too much about stuff. I don't want this video to be 4 hours long. We are going to be talking about our most disappointing albums of the year. And boy, do I have stuff to say about some of this stuff. So, I don't know. What were your thoughts?
Well, I was going to put Flux on this. I was going to say, despite being my number 11, it is also most disappointing.
Okay.
But after all that conversation, what else is there to say? But I will also add, there's an album by a band called Ghost, and it's not the Ghost that Austin loves so much with the weird.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not them.
Like, the Pope outfits or whatnot.
Yeah. And I saw a really funny meme about Ghost the other day that was like, who you think it's going to sound like and then who it actually sounds like. And it was like, oh no, it was just Blue Oyster Cult all along. Which is
There's a lot of funny memes about Ghost. They're a weird band, but this is not that band.
This is not that band. This is a synthwave band spelled Ghost. And my favorite synthwave artist is Carpenter Brute, and I consider him to be the, like, if you're looking for the thing that drives the way that synthwave should sound, will sound, he's just right up front. Everybody does, like, we're all chasing Carpenter Brute unless we're specifically trying to make something super chill in the synthwave world. And Ghost, I think, is the closest that I have found to that really intense driving Carpenter Brute style of synthwave. And they put out an album this year called Rites of Love and Reverence, which is good, but it is also, as far as I might not be right about this, but as far as I know, is their first album to have vocals for all their songs. Okay. And I really don't like the vocals at all, which is a bummer because it's the type of vocals that you would love. It's everything, it's that, I was thinking about this earlier today, like, how do I classify your favorite vocal type? And the number one reason most of the things you recommend for me don't land very well, and it's because all of the vocals that you love the most sound like Depeche Mode. Okay. Yeah, which is it's not a negative, it's just something I recognize, but this very much falls into that same category of, like, this is where you hear it and you think, this must be from Germany. Like, you just immediately...
You just got me so excited to listen to this Ghost album. Now I'm in.
It's worth listening to for you, but I would consider it a bit of a disappointment just because I wanted it, because of that aspect. It's like, why does this sound? Oh, that's right, it's this damn Ghost album again.
And had you been fans of them before this album?
Yeah, they have an album from 2015 called Behemoth that I really like a lot. And they have a 2016, 2018, and 2019 album that I haven't kept up on. So that's why I'm like, maybe they've had vocals since then, but I just am not aware. And so this one I just happened to catch, was like, oh, Ghost put out a new album. I'll listen to it. Oh, I see. So I just haven't really dove in too much of anything that they've made since 2015, but that Behemoth album I like a lot. There's like 3 or 4 like really like top tier songs on that album for sure.
So those are your only like disappointments?
I think so. Yeah, I don't have any on the list where I don't remember being. If we had done this in 2019, I could tell you all about the Issues album that led to the only time I have ever sold a concert ticket that was for a show I had planned on going to.
Oh boy.
That album was so bad. It's the only time that I've ever done that, where I was like, I have tickets for this show, and then the album comes out, and I'm like, I will not listen to this live, and I will not pay money to do it, so I will sell this to some other person. Yeah. Which is so irritating because that album also contains their best song that they've ever made. And so it is one perfect song and like 9 pieces of garbage.
See, and it's tougher too when an album is disappointing to you because it's a band that you already have like a relationship with, It's a different thing to hear an album that's just disappointing for whatever reason. Yeah. And you and I have talked about this before. Like, to me, the thing that makes an album the most disappointing is when everything about it is so great, except for that one thing that just ruins it. True Defiance by Demon Hunter. It's a Demon Hunter album. It's fantastic, but the kick drum sounds like garbage. And so I can't listen to it. That whole album is ruined. It's incredibly disappointing because of that.
Yeah, and if you want to, we could keep going, and the most disappointing thing that's ever happened to me in music is the second and third albums by LaRue. Her first album is untouchable.
I didn't even know she had a third album.
It came out last year. I listened to it, just another pile of mess. Like, it just has no character whatsoever. Yeah,
her second album.
It's such a disappointment. Really bad stuff. That first album is so perfect, and everything after that is just lost in itself. I don't understand.
And so it's also interesting, though, to think about an album that sometimes things are disappointing to me personally. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the album is bad. Sometimes an album is disappointing because it's bad, or there's an element to it that's bad. But sometimes an album is disappointing to me because it's not what I wanted. And that is what happened this year with the Damon Albarn solo album that just came out a couple weeks ago. Like, I was so ready for this to be what the Gorillaz albums have not been for the last 3 Gorillaz albums, which have been really disappointing to me. I wanted this to be Damon sitting down with an instrument and writing. I wanted it to be Everyday Robots, which is his last solo album. It was a very personal, very close mic'd, very intimate sounding album with fantastic production and really well written songs. There were a couple of like kind of more up-tempo songs, but mostly it was chill and had sort of like a cold feeling to it overall.
Mm-hmm.
This album, I was like, okay, he hasn't been making the music that... And Damon Albarn, one of my absolute music idols. From my whole life, I have enjoyed his music. And recently with the Gorillaz, he just has not been making music for me. And you and I have talked about this. I think we talked about it last year on our top 12 because the Gorillaz had an album come out last year and it was just not for me. They're making songs that you can't even tell where one song ends and another song doesn't because there's no repeating parts. It's just a cool part and then another cool part and then another cool part and then the song's over. And the next song
can occasionally work out. Like,
can, 100%.
Protest the Hero does that so well.
But when you have a whole album that's just that, it is really hard to differentiate from track to track. And I think what it's meant to be listened to as a whole package.
Yeah.
But Damon Albarn's album from this year, which has the stupidest album title of all time. Let me see if I can try to remember it. The nearer the stream, the more pure. No, the nearer the stream, the more pure the water flows, or something dumb like that.
Let me look. The nearer the fountain, more pure the stream flows.
Nearer the fountain, more pure the stream flows.
Which is nonsense. That's
totally
gobbledygook. Like,
right. But this album is fantastic in every way possible, but it is just not made for me. It is the same thing I was just talking about. It's beautiful. It really is. It's beautiful. And it is closer to being a classical album or a soundtrack than it is an actual album. And if it was titled something else, like Damon Albarn has released many other projects with other names, but this was a Damon Albarn album, and it's got all sorts of luscious strings on it and very cool instruments. There's my least favorite instrument of all time is very easily the saxophone, and there is
That's
a lot.
So funny. I love
saxophones are stupid, but there's a lot of saxophone on this album, and even that is done really well.
Yeah.
There's like baritone sax on here, which is really cool always, like low notes and stuff. But there's just these long sections, and then there's another sort of really beautiful section, and then the song's over. And then the next track is this weird sort of like Aborigines sort of like sounding ethnic percussion thing, which is definitely Damon Albarn's like wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. You know, and it just goes for a while, and then a little Casio beat comes in, and you're like, oh, this kind of sounds like the Gorillaz, and then the song's over. Like, nothing ever builds to anything. Nothing ever, in a satisfactory way resolves. Mm-hmm. It just kind of ebbs and flows and goes. And the only thing I can say is that it is not made for me.
Sure.
So that's Damon Albarn's album. Then we have to talk about the train wreck, the absolute travesty to the music industry that is Diablo Swing Orchestra's Swagger and Stroll Down the Rabbit Hole. The worst album I have ever heard production-wise.
Which is such a shame because that's one of your favorite bands of all times.
There is
specifically for that reason.
There are no other bands on the planet like this band. They are one of those bands that is truly unique. And if you're watching this video and you don't know who Diablo Swing Orchestra is, go look up any of their stuff, even stuff from this album, because you'll watch it and be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But
oh no, I'm thinking of that French band. The one that they don't say, there might not be French, but there's a ton of them.
Caravan Palace?
No, I'm really annoyed that there's so many that you have to choose from that are so specifically like this.
Are you thinking of Archive?
No, there was it's another band with a really long name, and I feel like they just recently stopped being a band, and they're like your favorite band of all time. Something with orchestra in it.
Kaiser's Orchestra?
That's the one.
Oh, yeah, from Norway.
Yeah, when you were talking about the whole
Diablo
time,
Swing Orchestra.
Diablo Swing Orchestra, I thought you meant them, Kaiser's Orchestra, and I was like, you must be just devastated.
Oh, that would really, yeah.
But no, I got you.
This is Diablo Swing Orchestra. They're the ones that do like the sort of like circus metal stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like this album, and it's actually funny, if you look up online, Diablo Swing Orchestra, Swagger and Stroll Down the Rabbit Hole, anything about it online, the only thing you're going to read about is the production. And how everybody, even people who don't know anything about music, listen to this album and go, something's not right here.
Interesting. I can't wait to hear this.
Yes. Oh, God, it is a train wreck. Because not only something happened when it was being mastered that went catastrophically wrong. Like, the whole album sounds like it was recorded in a box. Like, no, okay, I take that back. every song sounds like it was being played out of a box. Like
Ooh,
there
worse.
is no crispness to this mix whatsoever. Zero crispiness. And I'm not even saying that at your albums, you can have a song that's mixed like lo-fi and stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone somewhere along the line flipped a switch that shouldn't have been even on the machine to begin with, and they catastrophically ruined this album. If that was the only thing that was wrong with this, that would still be bad enough to make it bad, but that is not the only thing that's wrong with this. Possibly the worst recorded drums I've ever heard on a professional album. Like, just terrible. The guitars, terrible. The bass, non-existent.
It's so much fun
just
to listen
woof.
to you hate this.
Just total woof. The bass is non-existent woof. Then you have the vocals, which on some of the songs sound like they were recorded really nice, and on other songs sound like they were recorded with a microphone that was bought at Radio Shack down the street for $20.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you can't create a masterpiece with a $20 microphone from Radio Shack, but it just doesn't work. And the saddest thing about all of this is that all of the songs are amazing. Like, they are crazy. There is disco, there is folk music, there is intense death metal, there is all of this stuff. Every song is completely different. Every song, all the musicians put like 110% into everything. The musicianship is insane. There is a cello player in this band who's probably the greatest cello player I've ever heard play on anything, and he is the primary songwriter for this band. So all of the songs have this like swagger to them, and I don't even mean that swagger and stolen the rebel. There's like this feel to all of the songs that I think they have because he wrote it on a cello and the keyboards, which are his other instrument, I think. The vocals, there are like 10 people in this band. All of them do background vocals. So like the gang vocals and shouts are amazing. There's 30s flapper influence all over the whole thing. Some of the songs sound like they could be performed in like Sweeney Todd, and some of them sound like they could be performed in the Heights or Les Miserables. Like there's actually a song called something like Les Miserables or something on the album. Like everything is so great, but then the production is just shit. It's just absolute shit. And
that's so too
if you want to hear me talk about it a lot more, you can watch my video. And this is the one we were talking about where I included the audio from the album. So you can listen to it with me. And actually, it was really easy to hear me talking over it because there's no high end in it. But like, and actually in the video, I take an EQ, the high end, back into it so you can kind of hear what it was maybe supposed to sound like a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it is night and day.
Weird.
And all I did was boost certain frequencies. Like, if you go online and look it up, there are like graphs that people have taken of like they've taken like certain songs and they've done like a whole like frequency analysis of the song. And it's like the frequencies are like a normal song, and then it's just like, it just cuts out. And so there are people online who are theorizing that there was a piece of broken machinery, that like they recorded half the album and then a piece of machinery broke and then they recorded another half of the album, which is why some of it sounds amateuristic. Like it's just, but at the end of the day, Chris, I'll say this without hesitating. If this album was mixed correctly, it could easily be number one. It could be close to,
what a disaster.
It would be like masterpiece level of songwriting. And I really do not say that to just like be like over
of course,
crazy. Like the amount of effort that goes into this and then the just garbage that came out of it is so disappointing. And as I said in my video, like, I'm not sure who's to blame. Like, you know, I have been in a situation before where I was working at a recording studio and people sent me files to work with, and they were just, it was an album that was recorded poorly. Mm-hmm. And you can, as the mixing engineer, you can only do so much.
You can only do so much. Recording quality is so important.
100%. You can only do so much. But this goes beyond that even.
Mm-hmm.
There are multiple levels of people way underperforming. Like, this is just so amateuristic for the mix and everything. And then on top of that, whoever mastered this did such a terrible job with whatever happened, even if it was a piece of machinery breaking. I can, with everything I know and all the experience I have in the music industry, there's no way that this should sound like this. There's no way a piece of machinery can break to make every song sound like this. This was a choice. It was the wrong choice. I don't know how it happened. It's absolutely devastating and terrible. It's the worst sounding professional album I have ever heard.
Is your video of this I first listened for you, like live reaction. That's
Yes.
amazing. I would love to watch that because I
Yeah.
can't imagine how much just.
You can hear me fighting it. Like, I don't want to do it. But halfway through the album, it's just like, no.
And by the end, you're like,
the gloves are off.
Dog shit. Like, I will definitely watch that. I'm excited.
So definitely you should. So then I have two other albums that I want to mention being slightly disappointing. And one of them is the album Surface Sounds by the band Kaleo. And this is a great album. However, it's only disappointing to me because it didn't live up to the hype for me. It is not on my list at all. And Kaleo, for those of you who don't know, they had a huge worldwide smash hit back in 2015, I think it was, maybe 2014 maybe it was 2017 with Way Down We Go, Ho, Ho. Like, it was a huge hit song. It was in the Logan trailer. It was all over the place, and it made them a huge. They're a really cool, like, sort of blues rock band from Iceland. And it made them a huge internationally well-known band. And it has been like 4 or 5 years since that album came out. It was called AB. It's a fantastic album. There are many great songs on that album. This album came out, and it's really good, but it just didn't live up to the hype. Like, I wanted it to be as good as that album and better. And I do think in some ways it's better. It's significantly more consistent. It does have a dynamics issue where some of the songs are just like so quiet that you almost can't hear what's happening. And then it gets really loud. And I think they did it that way on purpose. Like, they wanted the album to be very dynamic. Yeah. And I think the album should have been compressed more, but that's not the kind of thing that would ruin it for me. But just disappointing because it didn't reach my levels of expectations, which is more on me than them. But, you know. And then the other album that I have to mention, which it's so funny you were talking about Kaiser's Orchestra, because the singer of Kaiser's Orchestra, his name is Janove. And I have talked to you before about Janove and how much I love him so much.
He seems wonderful, honestly.
He is, in my opinion, the greatest singer that's alive right now. And I'm not just saying that. And his music, and with Kaiser's Orchestra and his solo music, I've said before, is the music that comes closest to just like touching my soul. Like, his music is just, it is absolutely perfect to me. And he released an album this year that was 9 songs, and it just is probably the only thing that they have ever released that I would consider to be disappointing. And it just is heartbreaking to me because it's not as good as I wanted it to be. It is called Sorte Karneval, and it is basically like carnival music mixed with sort of that sort of alternative rock, little bit of bluesy, hip-hop feel to it that his music always has, but mixing a little bit more of like the carnival feel to it, which is something I love. Organs and all sorts of like cool like carnival sounding things. And it just didn't live up to the hype, which now we are moving into my number 10.
Yes.
Which is Sorte Karneval by Janove.
That's interesting. Okay.
And so I say it's disappointing because when Janove is releasing a new album, to me, it's like, well, who's going to fight for number 2 this year?
Right.
You know, because I honestly love him and his music that much. But the fact that this is probably the first thing that he has ever released that I don't think would be in my top 3 for whatever year that those albums were released. Like, his previous full-length solo album, Artisten and Marlene, is my favorite album of all time. It is my number 1 favorite album of all time.
Wow. Okay.
And his album with Kaiser's Orchestra, their last album, Violetta Violetta Volume 3, was my number 1 album of the past decade, because that's taking into consideration best, not just my favorite, but the best. Like, in my opinion, that album is fantastic, flawless. Every song is 7+ minutes. There's a full orchestra. Every song sounds like a James Bond theme song. And we all know how special those James Bond songs are, because there's so much effort put into them that are not put into regular pop songs nowadays. So this album has all that stuff. It has long songs. It's 9 tracks long. But it is, and it's 58 minutes long. So it's 9 tracks, 58 minutes. However, if you subtract the sort of like a dead time on the album, and the album starts with a train rolling into town and it ends with a train leaving town, like a carnival would, right? So that's kind of a cool thing.
That's cool, yeah.
But there's a little bit too much of the of the train. So if you take the dead time on the album, that like after some of the songs, there's like a little bit of a break, and then there's like a little bit of a 30-second instrumental or something leading into the next song. If you take all that stuff out, plus the sound effects of the train, that 58 minutes goes down to 39 minutes.
Ooh, that's a lot.
So this album has 11 minutes of wasted time, basically.
That's a lot.
And I'm all for being artistic and stuff.
Sure.
Like, I like that. But this is too much. But whatever. It's only 9 songs. So a 9-song, 39-minute album, that's not too bad, really.
Not too bad, yeah.
Now, the cool thing is, like, this album has several songs that are pretty long, and they have, like, string section, and it's really great. The production is really good. This is the first album I've ever heard in 24-bit, like, high quality. Like, beyond the quality of that a CD could produce. And it blew my socks off. It was fantastic. It's literally everything you would want from a Janove album, with the exception of he doesn't go to a bridge and a third chorus a lot of the songs. A lot of the songs are just verse, chorus, which is disappointing. There's 3 songs actually. Of those 9 songs, 3 of them are very short. They're like 2.5 minutes long. But the disappointing thing there is, it's like some of the coolest like beats, and I know it's stupid to say like it's a cool beat, but like
it's not stupid.
If you heard it, you would be like, this is amazing. Like within the first 10 seconds, you're like, this is amazing. And then it's that amazing for 2 minutes long, but then it just kind of stops. And so it's disappointing in that regard. Like he does things rhythmically that other people just don't do in their music. There is like a swagger to his that is just infused in his music, and when he uses it to its fullest potential, it's just amazing. And so yes, like it's like a 10 out of 10 song, but it's only 2 minutes long. Then there's like
2 of those.
And then there's only like really what I would consider of the 9 songs, and there's only like 6 full-length songs, and all of those are really great, but there's these nice long sections. And like what I'm finding with some of these artists is they're doing the verse, chorus out thing, basically skipping the bridge in the last chorus. But what they're doing then is, and I'm actually okay with this, they're extending the length of those sections. So it's like a double length verse, then a like half that length chorus, then another double length verse, and then a double length chorus, and then the song is out. And so it's like, okay, I get that. It's a different structuring than what I really want. The song's still 6 minutes long. It's neat. It builds. The background vocals are really great. And you know how I feel about background vocals and how they can change a song or an album. And so all of that stuff is really great. And it really does land, and it is really great. But at the end of the day, it doesn't satisfy me enough to be considered like fantastic, which is what I consider, like, in my opinion, this man has never made a below average song ever. Like even their little weird songs on older Kaiser's Orchestra albums that were just short little things, like they're there for a reason. They advance the story. All of it's in Norwegian, still all of it's in Norwegian, even on Sorte Karneval. And so that's, it's my number 10 favorite album of the year for sure. But it's still really disappointing because of all those things I mentioned.
Sure. And I mean, number 10, especially for someone like you, out of 300 some odd albums, really it's a hell of a spot to end up in. So it's totally fine. All right. So number 10 is Demidevil by Ashnikko. And this is a foray into a type of music that I historically do not spend any time in. It's very hip hop. It's very trap.
Oh, okay.
It is, there's a lot of this that is like new, like something I do not listen to this type of music ever, and I don't like that that's true. I just have yet to come across something in this genre that really hit me in a way that I want to keep listening to it. And this album is one of the shortest. It's 10 songs, 25 minutes. And my favorite song on this album is 2 minutes and 6 seconds.
Okay.
Which is unfortunate. It gets a lot done in that time, but another minute, it's in there somewhere. Just give me one more. And it is It's a very interesting album because it's like, it is a very raunchy, like filthy, intentionally. It is designed to make you uncomfortable from the perspective of like socially uncomfortable. Like I had it explained to me recently about this and several other albums in this same style of like, it's basically just women taking the things that men in hip hop have been rapping about for years and using their version of it. In a way of like, see how uncomfortable it makes you when I do this? This is an example of the disparity in the type in this industry, effectively. And so it is sort of that intentionally driven to be kind of like, but it's really very good. And I love the attitude and the things that really do it for me for her. Like, her voice is really, really cool. And this song especially, it's called Cry. There's just a couple of spots where she just throws in like a little bit of like vocal distortion, not like production distortion, but like actual vocal stuff, where she just adds a little bit of like an anger bit to a thing that she says. And then there's this really great synth line that lands in right under the chorus. And there's a lot of really good stuff here. And it's exciting for me because I have been wanting to get more into this type of music, and I found something that I like, and that's wonderful. Her most popular song, I'd say, is probably Daisy, and she does have another song that she did with Hatsune Miku sometime in the last year or so. But yeah, she is pretty big, but she could definitely stand to be bigger. I think that she could bring a lot to the industry and just break a lot of like norms apart and help with the glass ceiling and all that stuff.
Is she from the US?
Yeah,
Okay,
pretty sure. Okay. Yeah. And I don't know how to really like, yeah, there's a lot of trap. It's, there's a lot of rap involved in it. It's production wise, but it's just like, there's a certain darkness to it. It does still fall into, there's so many different artists in this that circle the drain of what Melanie Martinez brought into my life. And this does have a hint of that. It's got like almost like a childish kind of projection of itself, where like, because you know how Melanie Martinez has like all of her songs sound like they are intentionally written for children, and that they have these really dark themes, and that's like the disparity within their music. And this is kind of that same style. It's not quite as overt as Melanie Martinez's albums, but it does still kind of have that like, here's a relatively innocent projection or perspective of a bunch of things that are the opposite in terms of subject matter. And it just, it's just like, if you like one, you will probably like the other.
Cool. Okay, on to my number 9 then. This is the most recent album that I've discovered that made it onto my list. And I sent it to you like a couple weeks ago only, Chris, and I was like, you need to listen to this. And I don't know if you ever did, but I heard this album once and I was like, this is on my list. Like, no question about it. All these other albums on my list, I have listened to multiple times. Even the albums that came out more recently, like the last quarter of the year, I still found a way to listen to them a bunch, This album I have only listened to all the way through twice, but I loved every single second that I heard. This is The Phantom Cabinet Volume 1 by Pepe Deluxe. And
I don't recall this one.
I sent it to you, and I don't know if you ever even clicked the link or nothing.
I might have missed it, yeah.
It was the one where they have on the YouTube channel, the album, like, they specifically wanted to use as many like ancient and crazy instruments as possible. So they have on their YouTube channel, they have 6 chapters of some sort of a crazy instrument that they recorded for this album specifically. So they have like little documentaries of how they went to this place where this instrument is. They got permission to use it, and then they like show them recording the actual instrument itself. And they're all like 2.5 minute long videos. This track, literally everything about this band is really cool, and I'm so excited that I discovered them. They have 4 albums out. This is their 4th album. Their first album came out in 2006, so they only release albums like their last album came out in 2011, 10 years ago, and it was a very big hit called Queen of the Wave. And it made like a sensation, and they had like 2 songs in like Levi jeans commercials or something that really like brought them mainstream. I don't know how I missed them because it's totally perfect. But
yeah, I'm listening to the first song now, and it's like this is 100% up your alley.
Well, it is definitely the kind of album where like you have to listen to like minutes and minutes at a time, because very much like Infected Mushroom, every 30 to 40 seconds the song completely changes. And in some cases it never really goes back to that original state that it was in, but the thing is, there's 10 tracks on this album. It's 50 minutes long. And one of the things that's so cool to me is this album feels like one of those albums from like the late 90s, early 2000s. It reminds me of the Avalanche's very famous album. I think it's just their self-titled album, The Avalanches. But it is an album that the style of this music is like, I don't know what else to call it other than to say that it is like cutting. Like it's cutting records. And that's a very particular thing that I don't know if that means anything to anybody else, but like taking old records that you find and cutting little sections out of it and then putting them with all these other sections from other things, like Cut Chemist, like one of my favorite like beat makers of all time. He did stuff like this. The Avalanches are like the perfect example of this, but if you're watching this and you don't know who the Avalanches are, just please go look up their video, their album. It's like fantastic. Their debut album. But with Frontier Psychiatrist on it, that's definitely the song I would recommend to check out. But this goes beyond that, because these are songs that were crafted for this album, and there are parts that were all performed for this album. So like, I really believe a lot of the drums were actually played drums for this album. I don't think that they were just like a beat that they pulled from this thing here or a drum loop from this thing here. They were drums, and the bass and drum playing is fantastic across the whole album. It's incredibly varied. Every song is completely different. But the thing that's so cool to me is like every song on this album is a journey. Like it really is. And I'll talk about that a few other times, I think, as we go through my list. But like, I love it when every song is treated as its own individual thing. It's its own journey. And the journey that these songs take you on is just insane. Every song has different vocals from different vocalists. It very much feels like a hip-hop mixtape type thing, but every song is like 6+ minutes long. As I mentioned, they want to make it their mission to try to go out and record as much crazy instruments as possible. So like on one of the songs, there's like this really cool steamboat organ that's like a steam-powered organ on this boat that's been traveling up and down the Louisiana River for like 70 years, and this like 80-year-old woman plays this organ. It's these old wooden keys, and they have a video about it on their YouTube page where they show all this and explain it. They also use like a skull drum that's like a drum made out of human skulls. They use all sorts of really cool things. One of the songs, The Halls of Kalevala, I think is what it's called, or Kalevala or something.
Yeah, that's right. Halls of Kalevala.
The whole point of that song is that the song itself is giving you a tour of the Halls of Kalevala. And the song, there's no lyrics, it's just narration. So it's a person speaking. And the point of that song was the guy went there with his drummer and they recorded drums in like every room of the building. So a long hallway, and they put mics all over the hallway. On a moving elevator, they put mics on the elevator and above and below. And he had this like stereo microphone that he would walk around the drums with and record the drummer playing the same drum beat in all these rooms to mix all the sounds together. And it's fascinating. It's really interesting. This album is like the most audiophile album I've ever come across. Wow. This album is for people like us, Chris. Like, when I hear something, the thing I'm thinking, when I hear something for the first time, which you can experience it with me on my channel and all my reactions. When I hear music for the first time, I'm not sitting there thinking, gosh, I really, I am from a small city, like Jack and Diane. I really relate with them. They're, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not what I think. What I think is, where was the mic put to get that kick drum sound? Or like, how were those guitars recorded to get that sound? And trying to do that with this album, it is a treat. It is a real treat. Like, oh yeah, every single sound you hear was put there intentionally. And you know that every sound you're hearing has like a story behind it. And some of it is just like a cool patch on a keyboard, but I really think a majority of all the sounds you're hearing when you listen to this album, there was something that was like intentionally recorded to sound the way it does with the effects that it has. It has like lo-fi effects all over the place. The drums are crazy. There's a song called Big Fat Woodpecker that is like my uncle, who is like the most curmudgeonly, hates all music after 1970.
Ugh.
You know exactly those type of people.
I know exactly what you mean.
The first time I heard Big Fat Woodpecker, I was like, I think my uncle would like this song. And like that just shows you like the penultimate song on the album is called the Placebo like 109 or something.
Yeah, Placebo PCB1.
PCB1. And it's just like 2.5 minutes long. And that whole song is just a fake advertisement for a imaginary guitar pedal that like fixes all the problems with playing the guitar. And it's like the whole song is literally just like a guy screaming at you like the placebo CC whatever the thing is called. Like it totally erases the 10,000 hour rule. Listen as we crank up volume style. And it's like a guy playing the guitar really crappy and they crank it up and it's amazing guitar playing. And like I think like all the guitar on that album was probably like sampled from songs and stuff. So like it goes beyond just being like a cool song and it becomes like, how are the pieces to this puzzle put together to make the image the overall thing that you're hearing?
Yeah.
And it's really special for all those reasons. And then on top of it, you can watch their YouTube videos, and some of the songs have like full-length lyric videos. And it's not just a lyric video, I found. There's like text bubbles that fly in that explain to you like how they recorded this with like behind the scenes pictures and things. And it is really, truly a treat for audio people. Really, really, truly. And it's like something that's really special to me. And this album, in my opinion, definitely deserves my number 9 spot. And if I had more time with it, I may have crept up the list a little bit too.
Yeah. I love anything that you can sit and like listen to and you have to chew it up and dissect it. And every time you hear it, it's like, oh, there's a new thing I missed last time.
1,000%.
I love those so much and they're so hard to find. Like Good People in Planes is always my go-to for that when I'm trying to like testing out new gear and things like that, because I've heard it 10 trillion times and I know exactly what is happening. And it's like, there's a breath there, there's a thing there. And being able to compare it back and forth. And it's like that. Actually, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'm very interested in this for sure.
And the cool thing too is like it's really accessible album. Like even though a lot of the songs are like 6 minutes long, like sometimes the song will be like a cool and a lot of the songs are actually structured the way a pop song would be structured with a verse, chorus, a chorus. But and it kind of takes a while maybe to get back to the chorus. But like a lot of the vocals are like one thing that it actually really reminded me of was, along with the Avalanches album, was the 2 albums that a really, really cool band called I Monster released. And they did exactly what I'm talking about. They took pieces and parts from other things and then created songs out of those pieces and parts. And that's how a lot of the hip hop was created in the early 90s. That's how that stuff was made. And to hear that sort of a style of songcraft being utilized like this nowadays is really cool. And I think they're from a country in England or in Europe, I'm not sure where, and they just travel around the world to get these different sounds. So like there's so much cool with it. So absolutely, I would recommend this album to literally anybody that's listening to this video. I cannot say that about almost any of the other albums on my list, because there's always something. Like Janove is great, but he only sings in Norwegian. So if you don't like listening to music in other languages, I wouldn't recommend that to everybody.
Sure.
This, however, and actually there's a song called Somerville, I think, on the album. It's all in this weird like Nordic language, like Scandinavian language. And it sounds like something, it's just so different from the rest of the album, but at the same time it's not. But it's like a man and a woman doing the vocals, and the man is slightly panned to the right and the woman is slightly panned to the left. So there's like this weird like panning thing going on, but then there's like these lush choruses where they're all singing, but it's not in English, but I don't really know what the language is, but it's still got these really cool effects, and there's neat strings and all sorts of stuff throughout the whole album. So really, really cool album.
Yeah, I'm into that. I'll check that out. I don't know how I missed. I mean, you send me things every once in a while. Sometimes I hit them, sometimes I don't, but that doesn't sound familiar at all. And it sounds like something I really want to get after. So
well, and this year I really tried. Some years when we're getting ready to do this video, or when we were even before, I would intentionally like not tell you about stuff because I didn't want to spoil the surprise of you just finding out about it when we're doing this.
Yeah.
But then I thought, like, that's stupid.
What if it ends up on my list?
Yeah, rather have you listen to it beforehand and see if you like it enough to like make it on the list. So this year, I like several times I sent you like a list of like different albums that I think you might like and what type of music they were and stuff, and to try to like share some of the stuff with you. So, and I think some of the stuff you did enjoy. I don't know if any of it ended up on your list. It probably didn't, but
no, but almost did. One of the ones that almost did was Joke J. But it ended up,
sure.
Yeah, it ended up in that same category of like, this is just not my style of vocal.
Yeah, for sure.
But my number 9 is an album I brought up to you in January of last year because it came out like it was the first album of the year to come out. It came out in February. And this was a really interesting one because it was the first time that I've ever seen like on YouTube Music, they posted the album and then you got the full album track list. And only the singles that had been released so far were playable. So you at least got to see them all. You just couldn't listen to them all. And I've never seen that happen before. And I thought that was very strange. This is For Those That Wish to Exist by a band called Architects. And it's also the longest album that I think I have on here, which is 15 songs at 58 minutes.
Okay.
So it is definitely beefy. And this is the one where I sent you that Animals song. With the Animals is my favorite song from this album. And I sent it to you and I was like, if this album comes out and every song on this album is like this, then it's going to be album of the year. And most of the songs are like that. I think the problem ultimately is that they're all a little bit too much the same in terms of like, because they're all good, but it's like there's a couple that I can look at and go, yes, Animals I know. Dead Butterflies I know. I don't know if I could pick out every single one of these songs individually for, being different, specifically different from each other. And I think that's one of the ultimate reasons that it didn't quite make it to, higher on the list. But it is also because every single thing above this was the hardest part of making this list.
Okay.
And so it was like, it did start higher, and then it was like, oh, I can't put this that low. And so I had to put it up and then move that down, and you know how it is. But this is definitely a metal album. I would say, it's a British metalcore band. So it is.
Okay. And I've heard of Architects before.
Yeah, okay.
I had heard of them before, but yeah, I remember you sending me the song and being like, oh, this, I think I was kind of surprised that you had sent it to me as something that you enjoyed. But when you listen to it, I mean, it's like, it's definitely the kind of lyrics or the vocals that you like.
So. Yeah, it is. And it's like, it's interesting because I was never into this type of music until I moved here. And I kept getting exposed to it more and more by the people that I became friends with. I had a huge shift in my musical tastes, around that time. Yeah. And it just slowly worked its way in. And now I love it, and it's like, it's a shame because there's so much like emo stuff that I probably would have loved that I love now that happened years before, where it's like, boy, if I wasn't so quick to dismiss this type of music before, I would have loved this, and when it came out and so on and so forth. But man, it's just such a really dark album, but it's also kind of interesting. Like, it's, how sometimes you have these like metal bands and it always seems like really dark, angry music, but then you listen to like the lyrics and stuff and you're like, oh, this is actually, there's a lot of hope and like uplifting things happening in this song. It's just the presentation is very somber and dark and awful, and they do that a lot. And there's just a lot of very interesting messages in their albums. There's one where I'm not sure if it's necessarily political, but the line from the song that I specifically like is, we're just the rust worshiping the rain. And I was like, ooh, that's neat.
That's cool. Like, and very intriguing. Yeah.
It's just a really great turn of phrase. And so the lyrics in this album are really strong for sure. And yeah, it's like I said, it would probably be higher on my list if it wasn't for how much I love everything else on my list above it, honestly.
Sure.
And just the overall sameness of it, it had a lot to contend with.
Okay, everybody. So we are here now post recording the whole thing, and we have recorded for like 4 hours longer than we anticipated.
Yes, the whole day is lost.
Yes, and I will probably have to sleep for a very long time tomorrow to recover. But we just wanted to say that we decided to split this video, so you can look forward to part 2 in the coming days, probably, or whatever. It might be there already anyway. It doesn't matter. Go listen to part 2 when you have time, obviously, at your convenience.